This is the OMG Book Show with William O'Day, episode number 27.
Welcome to the OMG Book Show, where it's all about taking you into the brains of fantastic authors. No scalpels required. It's more than an interview, it's an experience. And now, your host, William O'Day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. Welcome back. Thanks for joining me today. You might be wondering, where did I go? What happened to the show for the past month? Well, I'm here to tell you. Why else would I be here? Well, what else I would be here for is to bring you an interview today. And that is going to be a fantastic interview coming right up. But first, let me go into it. Where have I been? Well, for a month now, I guess it's been, I have been, our family rather, and I guess me in particular, and we've had some help from the professionals. We've done some major renovation in the house. And if you've been following me personally and what's going on with my life, you probably already know that last summer, about a year ago, actually a year ago this month, we purchased a house and we were very excited, and it was a dump. I'm talking, it had all kinds of problems, like when you walk in a house and there's spray paint all over the walls and the carpet smells like a cat has peed in it for about the last 100 years or so. And it was ridden with termites, like one of the master bedroom, the back room. There were portions of the floor that felt like a sponge, when you stepped on it. So it had a ton of problems, and we did a ton of work on it last summer. But two areas that we didn't address were the two bathrooms. And one of the bathrooms, actually, we haven't been able to use the shower in for the past year because the really thin shower pan was cracked, and just budget wise and time wise, we didn't have what we needed to address it last summer. So we finally got around to it starting about a month ago. And the good news is both bathrooms are fully renovated and in fully functional working order. So woohoo to that. We actually have two bathrooms now in our house that work. What a concept. It's great. And they look wonderful. The downside of that is that my focus over this last month or so has been absolutely diverted towards facilitating and making that happen. Let me tell you, after all the work we did on this house and now also these bathrooms, I am getting to be a professional at tearing out old floors. And I don't think that's a good thing. I hate tearing out old floors. Let me tell you, it is a pain. It is the most backbreaking, not fun work imaginable. And that's probably not true. I could come up with some more things if I imagined them. But if you've done it, you got that big old crowbar, the whatever it's called, I have no, but you're just like, chung, chung, just like slamming over and over, like peeling up old layers of linoleum and subfloor. And one of the reasons we had to do it so intensely was the main bathroom. The floor had just rotted to dirt. Literally, like once I got down to the bottom, like the lowest level, there were patches of it that you could just scoop up with your hand like dirt, because it was dirt. It had gotten waterlogged and then just over time disintegrated back to like what worms would live in, essentially. So that's a lot of discussion about what I've been doing in the last month, but that is all finished now. I'm super happy it's over, and my focus is returning to all things authorly. And I'm writing right now. I'm just probably about 2/3 finished with the second book in the Best Adventures series, which is the middle grade series that I am working on for my kids. There's already one book out, The Slithering Goliath, that they loved, and many other middle grade readers that I have given it to have also loved. So I'm just about finished with that book, second book in that series. And in the background, I'm working on the beats for the book 2 in the Recovering Eden series. So book 1 is already out, Soul Survivor. It's gotten tons of great reviews and is doing quite well. So I'm very pleased for that to be working out so well. And the beats that I have so far for that are looking cool. And once I finish this second middle grade Bailey Best, the Best Adventures book, I will be jumping back over to that book 2 and hoping to knock that out in the next couple of months. So I know there are readers out there that have been asking me for it. I'm getting back to it. I'm back on the train, back in the saddle. Let's do this. Okay. Sometimes I get a little too excited. It's true. Anyway, moving towards our interview. Oh, actually, and I have one more bit of news to bring up. That a month ago, that period of time, the end of August, or sorry, end of April there, it actually also coincided with me doing this show for 6 months. And when I first started it, I had a lot of ideas, things I wanted to try, and, and it's been a lot of fun. And don't worry, I'm not retiring the show. However, I am changing the format a little bit. It has been every Tuesday for the first 6 months. And what I started to find was that it was just eating up a ton of my writing time, a lot of my productive time, which is quite limited because, if you have a family out there, you fully understand that I've got 2 young daughters that need and deserve a lot of attention. And so for the periods of time that I have available, productive time for the career side of things, I was just finding that doing this podcast and reaching out and securing guests for the show and researching them and just making sure that I was prepared for the interview so that we weren't just sitting there being like, hey, can you tell me about yourself? It was just taking a ton of my time. That's the point I'm getting to. So I have decided that the show going forward is going to be an every other week format. So that means I still get to do this for you, for myself, for the guests. We get to have a lot of fun and connecting with people, connecting with these successful best-selling authors out there. But it also means that the workload and how it impacts my writing time, which is actually where I earn money, is now halved, 50% of what it was. So that's going to be something I think that I can pull off sustainably going forward. And who knows, I'll do this for a few months or 6 months or something, and I'll check back in on the process and kind of see where I'm at. And maybe it'll go up from there. Maybe it'll change. Who knows? The future is uncertain. But the immediate future now is not uncertain because the reason that we have this show is we interview guests, and we interview amazing guests. And today is no exception. We are having a discussion with Nicholas Sansbury Smith, and I call him the grandfather of the post-apocalyptic genre. And as we discussed in the start of the show here with him, he is way too young, probably, I think in most instances, to be a grandfather. But he still is that way in some ways for this genre because he was one of the first people to get out there and experience success. And he's just got 4 or 5 successful series now. And he diligently works on his craft, on his marketing, on making a success of this career. And he's absolutely crushing it. So it's great to talk to him today. Some of the things we touch on are the way that he coordinates his production schedule so that he's, always getting fresh books out to readers, and how he does that vis-a-vis the various series that he has. And one of the very cool things that I thought was fascinating about this interview is he is very much a hybrid author. And in today's day and age, that means that he has one foot firmly in the indie publishing side of things, and then another foot or hand or appendage in the traditional publishing side of things. And he's been doing that for many years now. And so he's got a really experienced perspective on what has worked for him and what doesn't, and kind of what he's looking to do going forward. We also talk about his collaborations with Tony Melchiorri in the latest Orbs book, and a lot about just like how he works the writing life. Because anybody, we have different types of fans on this and listeners for this show. Some are readers, and then some are other aspiring authors. So you'll get kind of the background into a look about his life and how he makes it all work. So it's a super cool interview, and I don't think we need to get into it too much more. Let's let the interview roll. So without further ado, surgical gloves on, metaphorical scalpel in hand, let's get started. Today we're speaking with someone I like to call the grandfather of the post-apocalyptic genre. Today we're speaking with Nicholas Sansbury Smith. So Nicholas, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me. I've never had the honor of that nickname before, but I'm not going to. Yeah, I like that. I'm definitely not old enough to be a grandfather. In fact, I'm not even a father yet. So hopefully in the near future. But yeah.
Yeah. So I think that was part. You got married a few months ago. Is that right?
Yep, got married in January of this year in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. So it's one of our favorite places in the world, and we decided to do a short ceremony down there. And yeah, so I'm a little bit behind on my writing schedule this year, needless to say, but it was the best experience of my life. It was
awesome.
Great.
Yeah. It's a lovely location too. Congratulations.
Yep. Thank you. Appreciate it.
And then my next follow-up, of course, the obvious follow-up question to that is, what made you choose to ruin an otherwise loving relationship?
With what, writing?
No, with marriage. No.
Oh,
I kid, of course. I kid.
Really, yeah, it's really not that much different, honestly, than before. I'm lucky. I mean, I feel like she's my teammate, and she helps me a little bit with my business too, with the writing aspect of things, editing, reading the books, helping with marketing. And we do a little marketing business on the side as well with other clients, author clients. So it's been good because fortunately she loves to read, and she's been really understanding of this career, which, as I'm sure you know, is not easy. There's a lot of hours involved and a lot of stress involved and a lot of uncertainty involved as well. So it's good to have a partner that understands that aspect of things.
Yeah, that's true. And it's interesting you mentioned something I want to touch on. You said that you didn't feel like it changed very much. And that's interesting because my wife and I got married many years ago now. I think like 17 years. It's been a while. But we had been together for so many years coming into that when we got married, I was just like, yeah, this is still awesome, but it feels kind of like just like the day before, which was great. And it's still great.
Yeah. Yeah.
But she was like, totally no, agree. It's like so much deeper now, Yeah.
I mean, there's definitely more of a sacred element to it, I guess. But in terms of day-to-day activities and whatnot, it's not really any different for me, at least.
Right.
So.
Well, one thing you had kind of alluded to there, getting married and presumably doing a fun honeymoon or something like that got you a little behind on the writing schedule. Mm-hmm. And one thing I've noticed about just looking at your Amazon stuff over time is that you really seem to have there's several books on pre-order scheduled out, like 3-4 books into the future. Do you have a pretty set production schedule that you aim for?
Yeah. It's kind of changes from time to time because I'm a hybrid author. So I like to have a self-published novel it used to be every 3 to 4 months, especially with my Extinction cycle series that is now 7 books long. I was self-publishing those up to book 7. Books 1 through 6 were sold to Orbit, the science fiction imprint of Hachette Publishing, and they re-edited them, put them back out, new covers, and then I also wrote book 7 for them. So that was last year, and I think last year I had about six full-length novels published, as well as a couple short stories. So it was a busy year, but normally I think I'm averaging about 4 books a year, 4 to 5-ish, and my schedule is generally always having at least 1 book up for pre-order. And my Helldiver series, for example, is with Blackstone Publishing. They're predominantly, in the past, they've been audio only, but now they're moving into the print market. So I've had Helldivers 2 and 3 up Helldivers 2 is now out, but Helldivers 3 has been up for pre-order for like a year. And we'll have Helldivers 4 up shortly. But now my Extinction cycle is pretty much over. So yeah, I mean, I just have so many titles out there. I guess my Tracker series and my Orbs series, there's almost always something going on for me almost every month.
Yeah. You've got a lot of backlist going on, a lot of ongoing projects as well. I had a question about the Extinction cycle there. So the book 7 Extinction War, is that tied up in a bow, or is it possibly going forward from there?
In terms of what's happening with Orbit, it's tied up. That series could be complete with book 7, but I might do something on my own with a spinoff series that would be set in the future. I'm actually heading to Kansas City next week and to talk to a co-author, Anthony Melchiorri, who co-wrote Orbs 4 with me, to see if we can't put something together for that, because That's definitely a fan favorite, and I love that world. I'd like to get back into it. It's just if I can make it work, but it would be self-published. It won't be with Orbit. Yeah, I think as much as I love seeing the mass market paperbacks everywhere, it just doesn't make sense to do anything else with them. Nor have they asked me. I think it was kind of one of those things where they wanted to get all the books back out there into mass market, and that was an avenue that had not really been touched since I had self-published the others through Creative Space, and they really hadn't been in Barnes & Noble. But I just like having the control of the novels myself. That's why I've kind of gone back and forth with traditional publishing and indie publishing.
Right. And then that brings up a good question. So what got you interested? I mean, I guess maybe like the money made sense or whatever, but what got you interested in the first place because it sounds like now you have 2 series with more or less traditional publishing side of things.
So what got me interested in with what, Orbit, or just with
with the Extinction Cycle on the one hand, and then I think you said Orbs was with Blackstone. Is that right?
Orbs was with Simon & Schuster. That was the first series that I ever went with a traditional publisher. I recently, as of January of this year, I bought the rights back from them, and I republished books 1 through 3, and then Tony and I wrote book 4 and put that out at the same time. And Blackstone Audio then came in and acquired the audio rights, because those I had been able to get back from Audible. So they re-recorded all 4 Orbs novels with Bronson Pinchot as the narrator. And so, that's it's been an interesting experiment for me, especially with the audio side, because publishers generally don't do that sort of thing. But I'm doing a lot of books with Blackstone. I'm doing all my audio with them. So it's actually worked out pretty well. And, the Orbs relaunch, I wasn't sure what to expect either on that, but it's gone pretty well. I think all 4 books have sold about 5,000 or 6,000 copies in the past couple weeks. So it's been good. But in terms of the Extinction Cycle, I made the decision to go with Orbit for a couple of reasons. I kind of had sworn off going with the Big 5 again after what happened with Simon & Schuster, and it wasn't bad. It just was, the books didn't do too well with them. And after I had self-published them, it was kind of hard to see them tank in the rankings. But a lot of that has to do with the way the algorithms work. And when you take down a self-published novel and a publisher puts it back up, then it loses all of its ranking and also bots and pretty much all the sales history that propels that title in the Amazon ecosystem.
Right.
So all of the promotions that Amazon was doing for that series went away when the publisher put it back up. And I knew that would happen with the Extinction Cycle if I sold the series to Orbit. But again, going back to the mass market side of things, at that point in time, the Extinction Cycle had been in the top 1,000 on Amazon consistently for almost 2 years. And
that's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, that's when you look and see how many reviews it has, that's because it was there for so long. And I decided, this isn't going to last forever. And I want to try to reach a different market, because I was hearing from fans every single day back then, why can't I get this book on another site? Why can't I get it at Barnes & Noble? So I decided, you know what, let's try it again. And at that point, they offered me enough money where it made sense. The Simon & Schuster deal initially was definitely a gamble, but this was either way. Even if the books tanked, that would suck. I knew that would really, really suck, but I knew that I'd been compensated fairly this time around, and I wanted to give it a shot. I like to gamble. I really like to gamble, which is probably bad in this business, but you have to really risk money to make money in publishing. And, the books did okay. The mass market paperbacks did pretty well, but nothing stellar. They didn't make the New York Times bestseller list or anything like that. I think DJ Bolay's remaining series did for his book 6 with them. And I share an agent with DJ, and he brokered the Orbit deal. So, a lot of guidance from his end as well. And so that's kind of a little bit of backgrounds between the Simon & Schuster deal and then the Orbit deal. And I could throw in Blackstone came in and wanted to do my next big project. And at the time, that was Helldivers. That was my night and weekend project. And I didn't really have really any expectations on how that would go, but Helldivers has been my best selling audio series of ever. I mean, it's just been amazing. So,
oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So I will be doing more books with Blackstone. I really love working with those guys. And, I'm in the process of finishing up, a deal that will do, another hardcover and paperback, trade paperback, and then ebook and audio deal with them for a couple books. And then I'll probably keep doing the self-publishing thing, maybe working with Tony a little bit and possibly on my own if I have time. So that's just a brief overview of everything I got cooking and kind of how it all came together. I get questions about this all the time because I'm such a hybrid author and I have, multiple publishers, but,
well, yeah, you got multiple publishers, multiple series, definitely a lot of coals in the fire.
Yeah.
Well, how do you decide to, since you do have, so many, well, at least 4 that I'm seeing here series, how do you schedule it out where like you go from, one book for this one and you kind of rotate through them so that they all kind of get a relatively recent release, or how does it work for you that way?
Well, last year I was focusing on finishing the Extinctions. Actually, let me backtrack real quick because the model that works for me, and this is what I teach my clients, my marketing clients, the best way to sell books on Amazon these days is definitely a series. And my strategy is pretty simple. I try to get books out as fast as possible in that series. So like last year, for example, I always have 2 projects going on at once. And last year, one of those projects was my tracker series. So I got out pretty much all 4 books within 12 months. 12 months of one another. And I always had the next book up for pre-order. And that was the same process I had for the Extinction cycle. But then on the side, I'd had, the Extinction War, book 7 of the Extinction cycle project going on, also Helldivers 2. And then this year I just finished Helldivers. Well, actually I just finished Helldivers 4, but Helldivers 3 is coming out in a couple months. And, I'm writing another novel for Blackstone right now, but I have some indie books that I'm working on, and I'm going to save those this time around and not publish them right away, so I can publish them all together like I did with Trackers and Extinction Cycle.
Okay.
And the same thing I did with Orbs back in February this year when I relaunched books 1 through 3. I had book 4 out at the same time, just so what I call this mining my readers to my clients. And that is essentially not only it's basically making it very easy for a reader to find the next book if they like the first one, right, and just having them out and, in such a way where people can go from one to the next without having to wait very long because of the attention span. As we know, I mean, I've probably had about 1,000 different thoughts in my head just for this conversation. And that's pretty much how it works these days with Amazon, you know? So you really have to almost herd your readers into the right direction, or they're going to miss out on the pre-order, or they might not see what comes out next.
So then how does the, like I had noticed what you're talking about, relaunching the books in those 2 series, just because I was seeing the published dates were all, the same day. So do you, I assume anyway, you're able to bring over all of the reviews from the previous versions of the book. Is that right?
Yes. My Amazon rep was able to do that for me. Same thing with Extinction Cycle. In that case, Orbit handled all that. But for Orbs, I worked with Amazon to make sure everything kind of moved over. There wasn't really that many problems. I really thought it was going to be a difficult process. But, I've had a few people not understanding why they can't get the new books since they bought the old ones. And I've explained that, but that's also why I launched at 99 cents, just in case people did want the new versions for cheap. Right. Because there's nothing really different about them aside from I put an introduction in there explaining the situation and, what's happened and why I wrote a book 4 and just thanking readers and whatnot, just kind of the typical thing. But, the only really negative feedback I had was, well, why can't I download the old version? And the old version's still on everyone's Kindle if they bought it. or wherever they bought it, they just can't download the new version. But there's not really any difference anyways.
Right.
So like I got a 1-star about that. And the guy was just, I don't know what his point was, but he was just saying that he had purchased all these books in 2013 and that's all he said. It was just a 1-star review for the whole series because of that. So I think like maybe he thought that, I was trying to game the system or something, but it's very typical that when a traditional published author gets their rights back, they're either going to try to sell the series to another publisher, or that publisher will want to republish it, which is not very often, or they'll self-publish it. And that happens a lot. A lot of traditional publishers or published authors are wanting their rights back now so they can self-publish, because it's just such a better deal in most cases when you have a series that's not selling, it's not making you any money, readers can't even find it. If you get it back, you can republish it and do something with it.
Right.
Yeah, but I understand like a lot of readers don't understand how the Amazon ecosystem works. They don't understand how publishing works. So it's not something to really be mad about. It's just something where it's hard. I try my best to explain things to readers so they understand, but there's always people that, think that you're doing something wrong or you're not doing something legit. Yeah.
Maybe that guy was having a bad day and his dog just like peed on his carpet or something. And he was like, 1 stars for everybody.
Oh man. Yeah. I notice a lot of like raging 1 stars, and I have to wonder what happened to that person that day. You almost have to just think of it that way. I guess it's a good way to look at it.
Yeah. Have you, I've gotten, I think 1 stars can be, as long as you take them in the right manner, that can be really good entertainment. One that I got, and I don't remember the exact words, but it was essentially, you could tell it was done by a bot somewhere, because it was like, we're talking about a book, and it was like, this product worked very good it was a 1-star review, first of all. And then it was like, this product worked very good, very satisfied with its usage in my house. And went on to describe basically, I think in generic terms, just like any widget that might 80% apply to a bot leaving a review. But it was just way off the mark. It had nothing to do with the experience of reading a book.
Right. I see those all the time on Amazon. They get worse. But normally Amazon won't do anything about a 1-star review. Like if that was a 5-star review, they'd probably take it down. But I don't really understand why they're more biased towards positive reviews, but I guess they think people are buying them. I don't know. Yeah. That's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother interview, probably just on reviews. But I try not to, I do read most of my reviews, but just for feedback, because it really does help me sometimes, especially like if, on Helldivers 2, for example, okay, what did people not like about this book? So when I'm writing book 3, these are things that I'll focus on fixing or making better. So that's like where my reviews come in handy. But yeah, oftentimes there's reviews that just don't make any sense. Even 5-star reviews though, too. So
right.
It's
just, that's how it is. It's the kind of the lottery system bias towards how good the book is.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, and do you have, talking about like getting critical feedback, do you have a team of alpha or beta readers that you use before a book hits the shelves?
Yeah, for sure. So for my indie books, I have all sorts of beta readers, kind of depending on the title. Like for Extinction Cycle, I had a lot of military people with military backgrounds, medical backgrounds. Tony Melchiorri, that's how I actually met Tony. He helped me a lot with the science in those books, and that's when we really became friends. But then for my tracker series, I worked with a couple pilots to explain how aviation works, because that's something I'm not familiar with at all. But yeah, I always have beta readers. I also have, a content editor, a line editor, and then proofreaders for all of my indie titles. And then the publishers always provide those people on their end. So I actually put my system in place back when I wrote the Orbs books for Simon & Schuster, because back then I did not have beta readers, nor did I have more than 2 editors. And so I knew I needed to do something, and I kind of mimicked what Simon & Schuster had, which was a team of people specializing in different things. Right. And that's what I do now, because I want to be judged on my story and not typos or not, like formatting and whatnot. So I try my best to put out the most quality product. And, people ask me, how do you do that then in 3 to 4 months and get such positive reviews. And the thing is, it's because of how much work I work all the time. So it's not like I just
right.
just write something, slap it together, send it to an editor. No, I have like multiple steps. Like when I'm preparing a book for publication, that month is basically hell because I'm reading my novel, I don't know how many times. Usually it's like 5 or 6 times before it even goes to the editor, which is pretty typical of traditional authors, because if you send your manuscript to a top 5 publisher or an editor there, and it's like the average indie book out there, you're going to get it shot back. Like they're going to tell you to redo it.
Right.
So, yeah.
And then after those 4 to 5 to 6 reads, do you get to the point where you're like, I am so tired of this story. I'm ready for it to be free.
Yes, of course. I mean, that happens a lot. And sometimes I'll actually put a book down for a week and not look at it, just because when I come back to it, my eyes are fresh and I catch things that I haven't caught. And I also have kind of like this, I don't know what you would call it, but I don't really like to listen to my books in audio, nor do I really like to read them after they've been published, because I'm always finding things that I would change.
Right,
and
yeah.
that's my OCD behavior. So as much as I love audiobooks, it's very difficult for me after something's published to listen to it, because my mind's always thinking, oh shit, I should have changed that. Or, and especially like when you probably interview a lot of indie writers that have really improved their crafts over a couple years
yeah.
however long. And that's how I am. So I also just, my first novel ever is called The Biomass Revolution. And I wouldn't say I'm embarrassed of it. I'm just not like, it's just not like my jewel, I'm not
right.
proud of it really. Like I'm proud that I wrote a book and I got it out there, but I've been wanting to kind of do something with that novel ever since it came out. I wanted to re-edit it and stuff. And I finally took some time this year, put a new cover on it, worked on it a little bit and relaunched that one too. I didn't relaunch it in terms of taking it down and putting it back up. I just did some marketing behind it to kind of get it out to readers. I never really mentioned that novel to my readers before, because I just didn't want them to see how different that was in my Extinction cycle, for example. But, so that was kind of an interesting experience for me. But yeah, I don't know where I was going with that, man.
Well, did you get the feedback of kind of the reworked version? Did it seem to be generally positive, or people are like, oh, this is like way worse. What happened here?
Yeah, no. So I've had like one beta reader that was like blown away by how different it was, and he didn't really understand it. So like if a beta reader is critical with you, you kind of screwed things up.
Right.
But for the most part, though, I've gotten mostly positive feedback, and that could be just because the people reaching out to me are already fans. I don't know if there's people out there that are now not ever going to read an NSS book again because they read Biomass, but I made sure they realized, or at least I hope they read the part that said this is my debut novel, because I plastered it all over Amazon and I plastered it inside the book.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah, well, we all, hopefully anyway, as time goes by, we all can always look back, 2 to 3, 4 years and be like, I'm better now than I was then. That's the goal, right?
Yeah, for sure. And that's part of what I love about writing, is just, if you work at it, like you're going to get better. And that's also what I'm noticing too, like with, indie authors. There are so many amazing indie authors out there. And I kind of have mixed feelings sometimes about how Amazon works and the ecosystem that I've talked about. But if you think about it this way, Amazon has created a platform for people like me to make a living doing what we love. And that's pretty remarkable, because 5 years ago, if I would have submitted Orbs to a publisher, they would have said no. Same thing with Extinction Cycle. The only reason that publishers bought those books was because they had sold in the Amazon market. So, it's just, the other thing that's cool about Amazon is it works. Their system works around a simple principle, and that is what sells gets promoted. So a lot of the times, like what an editor at a top 5 publisher thinks might sell is not going to sell on Amazon, but what they think wouldn't sell or would sell isn't. if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Maybe
totally.
And that's actually kind of the case for the Extinction cycle, because I was told like, no, this is never going to sell. Like, this is not going to do well. And then it did. But part of that has to do with the fact that I wrote those books at a time when zombie novels were really popular, and I put a twist on it by using realistic science, and Amazon got behind it. So yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is that this is a cool time to be a writer, because there's opportunities now that weren't there 10 years ago. And I don't know what the market will look like in 10 years, but I do know a ton of I see a new bestseller almost every single week in my genre. The new author. So
yeah, and I think that goes across the board. Like, everybody involved, over time, it continually ups their game. So it would be almost probably hilarious to look at the Kindle store from like 4 years ago versus today. Even just the quality of the covers, you'd be like, oh wow, this is like radically different.
That's such a good point. I was actually pulling up some of my old rankings for my Orbs books, just to kind of use for my marketing clients, with the relaunch strategy. And I saw some of those old covers and what was selling back then. And it blew me away, because now you really need to have a good cover to sell a book. Back then you didn't.
Right.
You could have a freaking PDF or I don't know. I don't know anything about like making covers, but I'm just saying you didn't have to have a good one back then. And you could sell a ton of books. So
yeah, and I think it's I've mentioned this in other shows, and I interviewed Dirk Patton, who is doing really well also in this genre.
Yeah, for sure.
And he's he's kept with, but he's created a brand. It's almost like his covers, and I'm just, full disclosure here, I've actually read several of the books. They're great, but the covers are pretty bad. They're pretty basic. They're like how they were whenever he started the series, whatever it was, 4 or 5 years ago, and he's just kept through it. But at this point, I think for readers, it's become a brand, because there's a consistency across all of them. And so even though they're not maybe as suave as most covers are these days, readers see them and they can be like, oh, that's another novel from him.
Yeah, that's a good point. But the other thing about this genre, especially when I'm saying genre, I mean post-apocalyptic side, right. There's a lot of from what I'm noticing, I don't want to I would never want to discourage an author, but there's a lot of still not very high quality novels that are selling in this genre. And I think part of that is that the readers don't really care. I'm finding more and more books at the top of the charts have little to no editing in them and not very good covers. But for science fiction in general, or for thrillers in general, you can't really do that anymore. So I don't know if it's just genre specific, how that works or whatnot, but I have noticed the space opera field, there used to be books that sold like hotcakes that had terrible covers, didn't have great editing, but now that doesn't work like that anymore. Most people have a Tom Edwards cover or something else that's equally as cool, and even then it's difficult to sell books. So there's just there's a lot of competition in the PA field as well, but I think that readers aren't holding authors as accountable with reviews and stuff as they are in science fiction. Space opera is a tough place to, if you mess up how I don't know. If you say the works.
hyperdrive works with gravity megatronics or something.
yeah, you're going to get 1 star to hell. And that's one thing I noticed about Orbs too. It's kind of B-rated science fiction, and Extinction Cycle's not, but Orbs kind of was. And I realized there's a ton of readers out there in the science fiction field that want science in their books, realistic science, which is why I spent so much time trying to make the Extinction Cycle as realistic as possible. And the reviews compared to Orbs, it's night and day almost. So it does pay off when you're putting in the extra time.
Yeah, definitely. And then have you ever had, speaking of using these beta readers and kind of readers for critical feedback before publishing, have you ever gotten a series of comments or an individual's comments back that really changed something big about the book, rather than, just typos and awkward sentences or whatever?
Yeah, definitely. Especially with military stuff. When it comes to, I'm trying to think of some good examples, but there were some scenes in my tracker series with the submarines on how that would have worked. And I had to change a lot of that. I also get beta readers that disagree with one another. So like medical scenes, I've had situations where I've gotten feedback on a medical, I don't know, some sort of operation on someone in a traumatic incident and how they should be treated. So I've had multiple different opinions on that. So sometimes my job is to actually figure out what to go with.
Right.
And so, yeah, but I also learned so much from these people, which that's another thing that makes writing so cool is like, I make shit up for a living, but oftentimes my readers are teaching me stuff, my beta readers. So
yeah, they're extremely helpful. I just am pretty much ready to release a new book and a new series called Soul Survivor. And there's a couple of scenes in there of a helicopter flying over Kodiak Island. And the way that I describe what happens, one of the beta readers came back and was like, well, I fly Black Hawk pilots, and the way you describe this, and gave me like a point by point analysis of everything I had done wrong. And wow. I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. Like I learned it, and two, I can fix it to be more authentic now.
Yeah, that's cool.
Well, I wanted to ask you, with each of these series, do you have an endpoint in mind for each of them, or are you just kind of going like, what happens in the next book?
It kind of depends. Almost all of my series I've extended due to readers wanting more. But I do feel like some stories need to have, I don't want to sound like a hypocrite here, because if I do a spinoff of Extinction Cycle, I mean, that's extending the series, even though I'm starting off with a new title. But yeah, like for Helldivers, I'll just use that as an example. I only wanted to do one book, and I ended that in such a way where a lot of people hated that ending, but I thought it was pretty cool. And I would have stopped it there, but the publisher wanted more books, and now they want even more books. And Orbs, I always wanted to write a book for, but it just didn't make any sense to do that at the time because I knew I wouldn't get paid for it. And I was trying to make a living. So
right.
That's why I decided finally, once I got the rights back, okay, well, now's the time to do this. And fortunately I had Tony help me with that novel, and I finished the series the way I wanted. And now I have readers asking for book 5, but I really feel like the way that Orbs 4 ended, it needs to stay like that. Same,
and only
yeah.
like a massive spike in sustained sales could change that opinion, maybe?
Yeah, probably. I don't know. I just don't think that would happen. But like the Biomass Revolution, oddly enough, I still get readers saying, well, this was supposed to be a series. And I probably will never return to that world just because I like it as a standalone. And then Trackers, same thing. I mean, I had 3 books planned, and it ended up splitting book 3 into 2 books because they were at like 100,000 words, and I had to in that case. But so I'm looking at my bookshelf here, trying to think of how these situations came in, because Extinction Cycle was only supposed to be 3 books at one time. Then it was 5 books. And then, man, readers just loved that series so much and I love this series too. So part of it is just like my creativity's still there. And if there's more story to tell, I'm going to keep going. But
right.
Sometimes it just stops. Like with Orbs 4, yeah, I could brainstorm a new storyline, but I like how it ends there. Extinction Cycle, I kind of want to tell the story of what happens to these people like 10 years later. So it just kind of depends. There's a lot of factors that are involved, including sales, because this is a business. It's not like something where I'm going to focus on a book that's not selling, because then I won't be able to pay for my bills.
Right.
So,
and then all the other series wouldn't get written. Then all the fans would be unhappy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's going to be unhappy fans regardless. I've had nasty messages from people telling me like to finish one series, but like the world doesn't revolve around them. So I try to focus on what, one, I'm contractually obligated to focus on, and 2, whatever spare time I have, which is generally just like working at night and on the weekends when I can, to focus on my other project, my side project.
Right. And that's one thing I wanted to ask you about is just because it does sound like you have so many things going on kind of simultaneously or one after the other. What is a day in the life of Nicholas Sansbury Smith look like? Is it scheduled or free flowing? How does it work?
It's scheduled in the sense I'm always working, but it depends on what I have cooking that week. Oftentimes, like for the past couple months, I just didn't do any interviews or do anything besides write and edit because I was behind schedule. But normally what I do is I edit my books in the morning and I write in the afternoon. And if I'm answering emails and messages and doing my marketing the first thing in the morning, then doing my editing, then doing my writing. So that's how it works 5 days a week. And then on the weekends, or in the nights, I'm catching up on if I didn't make my word count, or if I have extra time, then I'm going to try to hammer out some more words. And I don't know. It's constant work though. I mean, I'm always answering messages every night. I mean, very rarely do I not do something, at least for, I don't know. It's tough because I know some authors that can shut off their work for the day, but I haven't found a way to do that yet.
Yeah, I haven't found a very good way to do it either. And it's having the 2 kids on board the SS, our family, you definitely have to pivot to new responsibilities. But yeah, I also have a hard time. I'm like, as I'm doing something with the girls, I'm like solving a story problem in my head, but also trying to be like, I shouldn't be thinking about this right now,
Yeah, for sure. The one reason that I think that I don't just shut things off unless I'm having a bad day and I just don't want to deal with it anymore, then I will. But like for the most part, I love what I do. I love engaging readers. Except for the nasty ones I told you about that think that the world revolves around them. Right. But that's a very small percentage of readers that I hear from. So, and normally I just respond to them the best way I can, the nicest way I can. Because the other thing about being a writer is like, you're kind of in the customer service field as well. Like some authors don't feel like they need to be nice, but my brand's built around that because that's my personality in real life too. So I think that's part of the reason that I love doing this so much though, is because I do, for the most part, love interacting with people and readers and other authors. So that's why I work a lot, because I enjoy it. Right. And I feel like a good thing because for 10 years I was working for the state of Iowa and, in multiple different roles, and I didn't care for it a whole much. So that's why I think I'm more driven to work harder now, or just work. I wouldn't say work harder as in I wasn't working hard then, but I just work way more because you almost have to too when you're an entrepreneur.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's like you're on the trapeze without a net,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I know authors that have taken off like a year because they had like one humongous book that sold 1 million copies, but then they've come back and their next book tanks. So I've always I was worried that I was going to be a one-hit wonder with Orbs. I think I'm kind of proving that I wasn't it, but I'm always worried that sales will tank and I won't be able to make a living doing this. So that kind of drives me too.
Right.
I mean, I don't feel like I have a gun to my head like I used to when I first resigned from my state job, but I still feel like this could have an endpoint.
Now it's not a gun now. It's just like a dull knife, It would take more work for it to hurt you.
Well, it would take Amazon probably doing something dramatic and like lowering royalty rates, which could happen if they put everyone else out of business. But I guess we'll just have to hope that doesn't happen.
For sure. Well, one more thing I wanted to, we're getting near the end of the show and we got a couple of things to do at the end. But one thing I wanted to ask you was, and we've mentioned it a few times here, the collaboration with Tony on your latest Orbs book. How did that come about, and how did you guys what was the manner in which you kind of worked together?
I guess it goes back to just, I always wanted to finish that story the way that I had planned and wasn't able to due to the publisher not wanting to pay for it. or just do it at all. And I think Tony, he had read the Orbs books, and it just brought it up, and we started planning. And so I flew down to Houston, and we met and outlined the book back in 2017. And then, the beginning of 2017, and then kind of kept talking through the year. Then we sat down and started writing it in probably mid 2017. And then I started getting this itch, thinking, maybe I should try to get the rights back from the publisher. So that wasn't initially planned when we wrote book 4. And my agent was able to get the rights back. I mean, I had to pay for them, of course, but we didn't even think they'd sell them back because the books were still selling. They weren't making a ton of money, but they were making the publisher some money.
Right.
So that's kind of how it came about. And then now we're talking about doing an Extinction Cycle spinoff, because the process was actually it worked really well. Basically, we just outlined the book, and I kind of used my typical process for outlines, which is making sure there's some sort of action and cliffhanger almost at every single chapter, and using multiple POVs to tell the story. And we carved up the POVs. He took some, I took some, and then we just pieced it all together at the end. And then when I was going through the editing process, I just made sure everything flowed, and that's probably what we'll do again. But that's, I think, a pretty good way to do it.
It sounds pretty cool. Like, I love the idea. Of course, it's like you're saying, you have to do a kind of a pass at the end to make sure it's not too different, but having two different authors write different POVs, intrinsically, you get that sense of like, these are unique characters when you're going from, POV to POV.
Yeah. And the other thing that worked well is Tony's writing style is very similar to mine too. So I had a few readers reach out and say that they could tell the difference between, or they thought they knew who was writing what characters, but for the most part, I haven't had, and I've had no negative feedback in that front either. So
that's cool.
I mean, so it worked well. I'm excited to do something else with him if we can make it happen.
Yeah, that's very cool. I just recently interviewed Zach Bohannon and Jay Thorne.
Oh, yeah.
Those guys obviously are huge into collaboration, and it seems like I'm well beyond them and what you're doing as well. A lot of it's almost like it's the next development in the maturation of indie authors, as they're starting to kind of do more collaboration and co-writing, things of that nature.
Yeah, I've noticed that too. And I just talked to Zach last week. And I do see a lot of collaboration in science fiction. But I also see a lot of authors that are hiring ghostwriters to help them pump out novels faster.
That seems like a dangerous game. Is it working, I guess, for them?
Well, I'm pretty sure that's what Bella Forrest does, right?
Or she's got to be a writing machine.
I don't think it's possible. I think that from what I've heard, that's like a team of ghostwriters working with her or whoever that is. I don't think that's a real name, but I mean, that's working. You have like the Michael Andreelli universe that he's pretty much got ghostwriters. I was on another podcast or interview with Justin Sloan, who's one of his co-writers. Mm-hmm. But what he said in that interview is that Michael kind of helps outline the book, but Justin does all the writing, and then they split the profits 50-50. So that's ghostwriting to me. Like, yeah, the guy's got his name on the book, but it's not really a co-authorship unless one of the authors or both authors are doing some of the writing, I think. I don't know. I guess I don't really know the definition of all this, but like when you hire someone to ghostwrite for you, typically their name does not go on the book. I'm trying to. It
seems like maybe the Anderle, his approach, and maybe even patterned it off of Patterson, and how because in the interviews I've read with or heard with him, he seems to do the same thing. He's like, he outlines a book and then gives feedback. Welcome to the Rorschach Round, where we use ambiguously odd questions to delve deeper into the minds of these amazing authors. Writes out. Let's get started. The meat of every scene and that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's an interesting approach, and it's worked very well for him. So it's definitely working for some authors. I don't know. I see some co-authors that aren't doing very well. And I think I don't know. It's once you get your brand to a certain point, you can hire someone to help you. and or just, split profits and stuff. I think it's a cool thing to do, but at the end of the day, I really do like writing my own novels. But it's something I'm going to look into in the future, just so I can, like the Extinction cycle, there's no way and Trackers, if I do spinoffs, there's no way I'll be able to do those on my own without some sort of help.
Right.
So in my situation, I think it's going to make sense, but there's just so much involved. And one thing I noticed, like with the editing process for a co-author book, it's almost just as much work as it is for writing it, or for a normal novel like that you've written yourself. The writing's not, but the editing is still it's almost harder because you have to make sure that their scenes are matching yours and that there's not any you have to be a continuity editor at the same time.
Right,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because if they mess up something that happened in chapter 1 and chapter 10 and it changes throughout, I mean, that's causes major problems. So that's the main issue I see with moving forward with co-authoring is your author has to know the storyline.
And then how, just last question on that collaboration that you've done with Tony is, obviously you guys have a good relationship. Were there times where like you'd read something and you'd be like, this is not really working? And then do you, you got to approach him like that? Did you have those kind of scenarios?
Not really. I think, I made comments in that edits like, hey, we might need to fix this or this needs to change, but there wasn't anything overall that really needed a major reworking. And I think part of that was because we outlined the book already. So he knew what he was doing. I knew what I was doing.
Okay. Right.
Yeah. But and I don't really know, I came up with this process on my own. I didn't do any research on how to do a co-authorship. Right. So I don't know how other people do it, but
I think that's part of like the entrepreneurial spirit, you're just like trying things and some fail.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to mimic my own outlining process because that's what's really helped me pump books out. And that's essentially just putting together a map of where the book's going chapter by chapter. I started off with the beginning, middle, ends in paragraphs. Then I break it up into chapters with the POVs of characters and explain what's happening in each scene. And I sit down and I just, that's what works well for me. So I decided to do the same process, and I think it works well for co-authoring too.
Yeah, that's cool. And I think I have a relatively similar process as well in creating the kind of the beats of a book. And you often hear like people talking about, well, are you a pantser, like into the dark, or are you an architectural outliner person? But I kind of feel like that's an extremely blurry spectrum because like when you're doing the beats outline, which I do, and it sounds like maybe you do a similar version of, all of that is writing into the dark. You're just making stuff up and seeing how it fits and that kind of thing.
Yeah. And I did that for my first book and it did not work.
Oh, you mean you went like the full writing into the dark approach?
Yeah. Yep. I didn't outline it at all. And I wrote that book over like 7 years. The Biomass Revolution is what I'm talking about. And so like half the time I'd go back in like months later to start working. And I'm like, who the heck is this character? I don't even remember this person. Right. So yeah. And I mean, that was when it was just purely a hobby for me. And if I got bored, I'd work on it. But then I got serious, back in 2013 when I saw like the opportunities on Amazon. I mean, that was really when the market caught on fire. I mean, that was Wool time period with Hugh Howey. And, so I wish I would have gotten in sooner, but
everybody does always, I think, right?
Yeah. It's just like the stock market, right?
And if only I'd gotten in it when Bitcoin was $1 or something,
Exactly. Yeah. Excuse me. Like choked there.
All right.
Excuse me.
Oh, are you okay? Does someone need to perform the Heimlich maneuver?
No, I'm good.
Well, we're getting near the end of the show, and as you know, that can mean only one thing. Okay, so if you were to have an autobiography at some point, what would it be titled?
Side part.
Side part. Ooh,
Yeah.
you got to think about that one.
Yeah, it could mean a couple different things. So I'll just leave that out there.
Okay,
I'm not going to explain what it is.
That's like the best type of art, you know. All right.
That's the first thing that popped in my head. So.
Oh, perfect. That's where we're going. All right. So next question. So, you know, being that you're into the post-apocalyptic genre, I've written a number of different scenarios. How is the world really going to end?
Such a good point. And you know what I was doing before this interview was putting together my bug out bag because I got some new stuff for it. So I'm definitely like a kind of a prepper, I guess.
Oh, good. Yeah.
And I'm writing an article right now for Locus Magazine on how post-apocalyptic fiction is changing the way we live our lives for some people. And I'm talking about all the different ways the world could end. And I mean, honestly, if I had to guess, it would be some sort of virus that medicine is unable to cure, or it would be a nuclear war. And I don't even think it would be a war that's on purpose. I think it could be sparked by an accident just because of how old some of the nuclear systems are for different countries. That's probably what scares me the most. Climate change is something that worries me, but I don't know if it's going to be the end of the world in my lifetime. I think it will dramatically alter the way, and I'm not saying, you know, whether climate change is man caused or whatnot. I'm just saying there's definitely no doubt that climate change is occurring, and it's going to cause major problems with rising sea levels in coastal cities and droughts. So I think that could be a major issue for probably my grandchildren, if I have grandchildren.
Well, it's something to consider. You're right. Do you want to put them in that situation?
Yeah. So maybe I'm the godfather of post-apocalyptic fiction now.
Yeah, I mean, you are. All right.
No, I'm just kidding.
Let's see. Next question. Aliens or zombies?
I've done both. But if you're asking what I think could actually happen, definitely aliens.
Yeah. Okay. And here's a follow-up question to that. So what do you think would happen when, assuming it hasn't already happened that we don't know about, when aliens like publicly meet mankind?
I almost think that it was kind of like that movie. Is it Arrival? Not Arrival.
That's one of them. Yeah.
Is that the newest one that had like the pod type ship or like spec? I don't
Yeah. It was like floating vertically over a field kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So like how we communicated or tried to communicate with those aliens, I think it would be very, very difficult. If they are able to make it here, they're going to be so technologically advanced. You would think they'd be able to communicate with us, but on the same token, I mean, they might be so different from us. They might not even be a biological life form. They might be some sort of artificial intelligence or some sort of like gas type.
Oh, like nebulous sort of creature.
Yeah. So it might be difficult to communicate. I don't know. I think more than likely there will be some militaries that will just fire their arsenals regardless.
Right. Because it's like potential danger, fire.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So. Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. We've got our prognostications. Put them in your diaries somewhere in the years ahead. All right. Well, Nicholas, thank you so much for that oddly ambiguous round of the Rorschach.
Yeah.
And before we go, though, I wanted to find out, and you had kind of mentioned a couple things there, but what new releases and upcoming projects do you have that readers can look forward to?
For now, the only thing up on pre-order is Helldivers 3, but Helldivers 4 will be going up for pre-order soon too. And that Helldivers 3 comes out May 15th in all formats, wherever books are sold. Helldivers 4, I think they're shooting for a November release date. And I should have something else between May and November, some indie title, but I can't really announce anything yet because I'm not totally sure. So That's what I have cooking.
Very cool. We'll get the relevant links into the show notes. And if folks want to find out more about you and all the amazing books that you write, where should they go?
I think probably the easiest place to see what my titles are, either my website, which is nicholassansburysmith.com, or my Amazon author page. That's probably the easiest, because then you can just see everything listed out. And that's Nicholas Sansbury Smith on Amazon.
Okay, we'll get the links for those in the show notes as well. And basically, I just want to thank you again. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thank you, William. I appreciate it. Thanks for letting me ramble.
So I hope you enjoyed the show today. I certainly did. Thank you so much to Nicholas Sansbury Smith for joining us. And Nicholas, personally, I have to say, thank you so much for coming on the show. And also, I apologize that it did take a little bit longer to get out to the public than originally anticipated. So if you want to check out some of the links mentioned there at the end of the show, they, as usual, are in the show notes at www.williamoday.com/ the number of the episode, which is 27 in this case. Oh, and also, I think I'm going to throw in some pictures of that bathroom renovation, or maybe it'll be its own blog post, so you can check that out and see what I've been up to for the past month. So thank you so much again for joining us, and we'll see you next time. That's it for today. If you would like to be sure to never miss a show and always have them immediately available on your device of choice, you can subscribe by going to www.williamoday.com/iTunes. And if you enjoyed the show, I would so appreciate a rating and review on iTunes. They both help with store visibility, and they also let other listeners know if this show is something that they might be interested in checking out. And I've made it easy to access both of those by going to the same link on my website, www.williamoday.com/iTunes. That will have a link there that you can jump over to either subscribe and or maybe all three, rate and review the show. So I would so appreciate that. Thank you so much. That's it for now. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the OMG Book Show. You can find out more at www.williamoday.com.